Hey everyone, welcome to my channel, Books, Gurrs, and Purrs. Today I'm going to be reviewing My Brother's Husband, which is a manga comic series. I have the huge, giant version. I guess this was originally 2 volumes, but I have it as I think it's called a compendium, as one. Alright, so this story centers around Mike Flanagan, Yaichi, Natsuki, and Kana. Those are basically the main characters of the story. So Mike was married to Ryoji, which is Yaichi's brother. This is Yaichi. So Ryoji passes away, and from there Mike decides to go and visit his family that he's never met. And ultimately Mike has an agenda to be accepted as a part of the family. So what I learned from this book is that I guess in Japanese culture, people are still very closeted. It's still very taboo to be openly gay. And so when Mike is there, he brings his Western Canadian affability to the family and his openness about being gay. And it not only affects the family, it also affects their community. Although Yaichi receives Mike in his home, he's not completely accepting or opening, but there's this cultural cordiality that Yaichi has towards Mike, as where his daughter Kana really just loves Mike from the get-go. And so through the character of Kana, who's just a young kid, she openly accepts Mike. And so then Yaichi has to really reevaluate how he treated his brother growing up and learning that his brother was gay. So what I really appreciated about this story is that Yaichi really has internal dialogue throughout the book. He doesn't disrespect Mike, but it's more about him being confronted with someone that's so openly gay, and then Yaichi having to reflect and reevaluate how accepting he is of homosexuality. The other way that this topic is explored is the fact that Natsuki and Yaichi are no longer married, they're divorced, which is also considered a taboo. And in reflecting on how he accepts himself and his daughter and his ex-wife as this family that maybe doesn't look like whatever the ideal that is the expectation in Japan, Yaichi realizes that if he is so accepting of his own family, then he should be just as accepting of Mike and his brother has passed away. And I very much feel that Mike coming into their family gives Yaichi a chance to heal in a way, to mend how he feels about his brother, having to reevaluate that maybe he wasn't as close to his brother as he could have been, and really seeing that it was in some ways internalized homophobia and the pressures of what's considered the status quo. I really enjoyed how the story just focused on themes of grief, family coming together, talking about homophobia, but in a way that is more meditative and introspective, and really talking about the stigmas in society. Through the character of Mike, he comes across different people in his deceased husband's life, and through those interactions on his own, we as a viewer get to learn about other people being closeted from adulthood to being in their youth, and how they navigate the world, how they feel about that, the pressures of it, realizing that even just being able to just verbally say that a character is gay is like really just climbing a mountain. And Mike just really affects the community in a positive way. And I really enjoyed just the entire book, that it wasn't necessarily about needing to show specific examples of someone being discriminated against in order to get it across the point that people should be accepted equally for who they are. I think there's just like one part in the book where a very blatant discriminatory action takes place. But I do appreciate that it's not like constantly throughout the comic. I just feel like as far as representation goes, you know, in movies or literature, I just feel like it doesn't necessarily always have to be at the expense of someone being treated badly throughout a narrative. So reading this book was an absolute joy. I love the characters. I love Kana. She's just like a sweet little kid. And I enjoyed her youthful honesty that really brings out topics that I don't think adults would really ask, but having the conversations explored through the lens of Kana really helped to move forward the narrative and the conversations that the writer wanted to have in this book. So I just really enjoyed this. I recommended it. I recommend you read it. And the author, Gengora Tagame, also co-founded G-Men magazine in 1994, and I thought that was pretty cool. So go ahead and pick up a copy. I absolutely enjoyed it. This is written by Brian K. Vaughan, who's also written the comic book series Why the Last Man and I think it's Paper Girls? Yeah, Paper Girls. Marco, Alana, Hazel, and Clara are still on the run. At the end of volume 2, they're on the search for the author Oswald, who wrote the novel that functions as like a trash romance, but really it's a way to talk about pacifism, and that idea of pacifism basically plants a seed into Alana and Marco at the very beginning of the series. So in this volume they do find Oswald, and their time with Oswald is actually this unintended moment of respite from the war and the fact that there are fugitives on the run. Marco and Alana are faced with discussing and planning the future for the three of them, for Hazel, because they are fugitives on the run, and how do they create a sense of normalcy in this world while trying to raise their daughter. Marco and Alana are definitely in a part of their relationship where they now have to dig deeper and just become more vulnerable in order to figure out what to do with their lives. In this particular volume, my favorite dynamic is actually Clara and Oswald. Clara is Marco's mother, so she's the grandmother of Hazel, and she's just recently still grieving the loss of her husband. Oswald is a character who's had lost plenty of people in his own life, and their dynamic is so funny and just great to enjoy, because these are two people that have polar opposite ideologies in a way. They're both people that are willing to challenge each other and have tough conversations. They really enjoy each other's company, and I love anytime I pick up a book and there's a tangible book lover interwoven into the narrative, and I very much feel that with Oswald since he's a writer. Clara and Oswald are two people that lost loved ones directly or indirectly due to the perpetual war that the planets are in, and I feel like that is a discussion that they have together, but that's really what is a discussion in some form in every volume of the series, and I really appreciate those discussions. The Will and Gwendolyn have to face their changing dynamic, and what are they really trying to accomplish? What do they really want from what they originally set out to do while they're on this journey? What I really loved about Will and Gwendolyn's story is that them together, the Will faces the fact that he has to give Sophie a name, formerly slave girl, and I really appreciate that the author sprinkles in stories about Sophie and how she feels about herself. She's just a little kid that was human trafficked and forced to do terrible things on the planet of Sextillion. And so I just appreciate that the Will gave her a name, and I feel like that helps to have her create her own identity and also divorce her from all the terrible things that she's been through. Similarly, Isabel, who's the ghost girl slash babysitter of Hazel, definitely functions in a similar way as Sophie in Marco and Alana's life. I feel like she provides a little bit of comedy relief, but she's always a figure in their lives that's a reminder of the human casualty of war. Early on, I want to say in the first volume, she's also very much a symbol of the devastation that happens to a planet, but I guess I could also be consider different countries in our world that are really devastated by war. Every time Brian K. Vaughan brings in new characters, I find new narratives for me to be attached to. And for this volume, it's Upshire and Goff, who are the reporters. They're freelance reporters. And through their narrative, you get to see a discussion between what is a function of a reporter during war-torn planets, and what is propaganda. How are reporters treated in a war zone? What are you willing to do for that truth? How much of yourself are you willing to put at a cost? Is your life worth the story? And a little a funny idea I had when I was reading this comic is that Upshire reminds me of Anderson Cooper, but I don't know if anyone else feels that way or if that's ever come up. Once again, I've really enjoyed this comic. This is a reread for me. I'm just trying to maybe keep more of a keen eye for all the little details, and again, I just love it. I'm always going to recommend it. Anytime I do a review, it's going to be me loving this story. Brian K. Vaughan does this thing where he'll bring in characters, and within the same volume, he'll kill off new characters that you've just found yourself being so attached to and loving, and he does that really well. So he just has a knack for character development that I'm really in awe of. So if you haven't read this, pick it up. I absolutely love Ocean Vuon's work. He's put out a poetry collection before, Night Sky with Exit Wounds, which I absolutely loved. And then he put out his debut novel, a work of fiction that is On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous. I love that work as well. I also love this, but if we're going to put it on a scale of comparing his work, because he's such an incredible writer, it's kind of hard not to. He's kind of created this beautiful existence of poetry and fictional narrative all of his own, with the way that he uses prose and verse. I'd have to say that On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous is one of my favorite books, but of his work, that's like number one. And then his poetry collections would be second. This I liked a bit less than Night Sky with Exit Wounds, but it's still a great read. So in this book, he's exploring the loss of his mother, and as well as other topics that he's explored, which is him being gay, him being Vietnamese. I feel very much at times he's discussing how he's viewed, or the narratives that he comes up against from others in America, being an American, Vietnamese American, some of the subjects that he comes up against. And so one of them that I wanted to discuss, I'm going to read what he wrote because it's best said in his own words. Okay, so Ocean Vaughn writes, once at a party set on a rooftop in Brooklyn for an artsy vibe, a young woman said, sipping her drink, "You're so lucky. You're gay plus you get to write about war and stuff. I'm just white." Pause. I got nothing. Laughter, glasses clink. So what he's exploring there is this myth of what someone who's a part of a minority group or someone that's been through hardship should be able to accomplish. It kind of reminds me of Alicia Elliott's work, A Mind Spread on the Ground, because in that book she writes that she was actually, before I say that, if you're not familiar with that work, it's a work of nonfiction. It's a memoir, and Alicia just explores mental illness, being a person of the indigenous community, and she came up against something similarly when she was in a writing program. A white person turned to her and just said like, "Oh, well, because you're indigenous, you're gonna easily get into another writing program," which is just not the case. I don't really know where that minority myth comes from, if I could call it that. But it's this idea that if someone's been through great suffering, they're at somehow at an advantage, which is just absolutely ridiculous. So I felt like that's in a similar vein with what's being discussed in Ocean Vaughn's poetry here, is that there's someone that looks at the tragedies of his family being torn apart from their land in Vietnam due to the war that took place there, and then placed over here in America to have to start over, if that's even possible. And I don't know, I don't even know what to say about someone looking at someone else and saying, well, because you've been through all these struggles, are being put in a position because you're gay, where there's struggles in society. Now you could just like rub your fingers together and make art easier. It's just so ridiculous, but that stood out to me and kind of rubbed me the wrong way. But I think that's what's really great about Ocean Vaughn's work, is that he could take moments and kind of put a mirror up to just like the shittiness of humanity. I'll just say that. That's just, I'm not as poetic as him to say it any better. There's one other moment that I really loved in his work, so I'll just read it and then talk about it. And that is on page 5, there's a poem called Snow Theory. Okay. And Ocean Vaughn writes, one by one the houses turned off their lights. I lay down over her outline to keep her true. Together we made an angel. It looked like something being destroyed in a blizzard. I haven't killed a thing since. So throughout the novel, so throughout Ocean Vaughn's work of poetry, he uses snow, I think, as a symbolism of death, which is, I've only seen used in films, and I think it's also discussed in literature that way. So that really stuck out to me. But what I really loved about this moment is I felt like when he's creating a snow angel, I feel in a way that's his attempt to preserve his mother. At least that's how I took it. But if I'm wrong, please correct me. I felt like he's just trying to hold on to her existence through this action. And I thought that was really beautiful, really loving. And also, he describes it in a violent way, right? Murdering something. And it's something to think about. I don't want to say too much more about his work other than to say that he's really great. I don't know how he does it. I'm just going to have to study his work more. He has this way of jumping through time from moment to moment. And I saw that really exhibited in On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous, but he does it again so well in his poetry collection here, and I really appreciate that. My only critique, and I don't even know if I should call it critique, but I'll just say that because also I'm not an expert at poetry. I'm loving reading certain poetry collections, but it's still not my my go-to genre, if you will. At times, I think there are like 2 separate poems in here where Ocean Vuong switches from a poetic narrative to more of a prose narrative, and I'm just not sure what he's doing there. I don't know if that's considered experimental, or maybe I just don't understand. So if anyone has anything to say about those 2 more prose prone, I don't know what you want to say, poetry pieces, I'd like to hear what you have to say about it. I wasn't sure how it fit in to what's going on, but again, I think I'm just going to have to reread this particular work to kind of get a better grasp on it. So yeah, I did like it. I didn't love it as much as I did On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous and Night Sky with Exit Wounds, but it's still a great read. And I'm definitely going to feel that way throughout his entire career because everything he writes is just absolutely beautiful. So pick up a copy. So the story is told through a spirit named Asagura. Asagura is in a banji, which is known as an evil spirit that comes into the world and that is meant to die to bring misfortune to the family of a newborn baby, a baby, pretty much. But in the instance of this book, Ara, the body that the Obanji spirit inhabits, continues to live. Ara and the Obanji spirit continue to grow together as they try to inhabit the body together, existing in a plurality. Throughout the book, Ara only briefly becomes a narrator. It's largely told through the spirit, who ultimately is an unreliable narrator. The themes that are explored in the book are sexuality, the complexities of identity, how much agency and responsibility you have over yourself, a disconnection from one's own culture, romanticism of violence, as well as exploring mental health versus spirituality. Asagura, the Obanji spirit, claims to want to protect Ara, but there are just so many moments in the book where the spirit seems to relish in the destruction, the violence that Ara commits against themselves. Even the mental health struggles Ara faces. Ara and Asagura struggle to coexist, which is where I feel Ara's mental health struggles are rooted from, and they just seem like they're both very much codependent on each other. What I really love about the writing in this book is that the author writes in a way that defines the spiritual existence versus the reality that we live in. For instance, Ara is referred to as the body, the flesh. She's described in a way that uses her physical attributes, such as her bones. Even Ada's brain or protective consciousness is described as marble, an object, a solid object, as where spiritual beings are described as smoke and shadow. And from there, the author uses natural elements to describe spiritual connections, such as an action or an emotion. Like on page 55, it says something to the effect of, "That was the first thing that made us interested in him, his anger, his rich, thick blood sap anger." So I like the use of sap to explain how something is felt deeply, that it's so thick. It's not something that's easily like penetrable. Another great example of this is page 160. The author writes, "He wanted a soft moon in his hands, and he got a scalding sun." Or later on, the author also writes, which is probably my favorite, which is on 193. "The space between life and death is resurrection. It has a smell like a broken mango leaf, sharp, sticking to the inner rind of our skin." This is a technique that the author continues to use throughout their other work, but I feel like it's continued to be effective, and in no way does it ever feel redundant. Since the locations of the book take place largely in the United States, there are certain pop culture references made, such as Gilligan's Island, the music of Linkin Park, McDonald's. And so at times when I'm reading the narrative, I'm not sure what the author is trying to say with that. Sometimes, I mean, for instance, when the author brings up Linkin Park, it's in reference to Ada not really being accepted or rejected in some ways, as not maybe fitting the mold that she's expected to. And sometimes I think there's these very specific references to westernization, and like I think early on there's a reference to her father and how maybe if he was more connected to his cultural traditions, he would be more in tune with what's going on with Ada. So I kind of feel like that's kind of the direction that the author is going. The only critique I have about the book is that there's a moment that the spirit Asagura makes a comment about being with a man sexually. There's like a reference to their penis size, and the spirit kind of balks and says, "I don't know what to do with this." This is like where I draw the line, which is very funny, but it just took me out of the book in a way that I don't know if it meant to. I guess I was thinking the whole time that this is a character that crosses the boundaries, says that they want to protect Ada, but I don't really feel like they truly are. And I don't think that they're completely telling the truth about what their agenda is or not having an agenda with Ada. So the fact that the character draws a line with the anatomy of a man just kind of threw me. That was the only thing. Like, it was funny. I don't know if it was just meant to be that, but it definitely took me out of the book for a minute. But beyond that, I absolutely love the book. I love this author. I'm just gonna keep reading all their other work, and I just feel like there's so much more to explore with this book that I probably didn't even cover, because there's just so much going on thematically. And so at some point I'm going to want to read this again, and it's pretty crazy that this is their debut novel because it did such an incredible job. So if you read the book, let me know what you think about it. And that's about it for my review. Please feel free to like, subscribe, comment below, and I guess I'll see you later. Hey everyone, welcome to my channel, Books, Gurrs, and Purrs. Alright, so I'm finally wrapping up what I read for the month of June. I didn't get around to one last stop. I don't want to review this book, that's why I don't have like a separate review for this in my standalone playlist. This has all the trappings of a book that I would enjoy. I just couldn't get into it, so I didn't want to. I'm sorry, that's my cat. Please stop. She's trying to cuddle with this. Sorry. This book has magic, a really cute romance, adorable characters, but I can't really provide a review because I only got so far into it and I couldn't get into it, and it's not a knock on the book, and since I didn't get very far, I can't really provide literary criticism. Stop. My cat's yep, there we go. Stop. Sorry. I'm trying to squeeze this in because I haven't had a chance to get to this, so leave it to my cat Tariel to keep wanting to rub against the pole. All right, so yeah, so I'm not going to provide a critique of this just yet. I'll probably read it around the same time next year. I just don't think I'll do the book justice right now since I didn't get very far. The other books that I read that are also my standalone reviews are My Brother's Husband, Saga, Freshwater, and Time as a Mother. I enjoyed every single one of these books. I'd have to say, if I had to pick a favorite, it's gonna be a tie between My Brother's Husband and Freshwater. As you know, I love Akwaeke Emezi, so I'm really biased there. Anything I pick up by this author, I just absolutely love. What I enjoyed about all these books, even, I'm trying to think of the name. I had to grab it. Even One Last Stop, even though I didn't get very far, I enjoyed how each of these books, in their own way, coincidentally touch upon the theme of found family. And because of the books that I picked for June, which is Pride Month, there's definitely a conversation around identity, whether it's sexual or gender, certain topics that a person comes up within a society between what the status quo is and what a person really values and sees in themselves. So that was just a really beautiful month of exploration. And something that I also noticed is that even though every month I'm tackling a specific theme or a specific topic, actually more like a specific topic that I want to explore, Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples' saga seems to fit in with whatever I'm talking about each month, which is just a testament to the material, because it's just chock full of different subjects, and the author and the illustrator just tackle whatever they want to talk about along the way. And so there's always some little gem that you're going to notice that you might not have noticed before, especially since this is a second read for me. And on another note, you know what? Sorry, my cat. Stop, sweetie. Stop. You know what? I lost my train of thought. All I have to say is that I loved every single one of these books. And, oh my God, please stop. Yeah, this is going to be a thing. All right. Anyways, I'm going to wrap it up. If you have any other questions or anything you would like to add onto what I said, please let me know down below. Subscribe, like, and I guess I'll talk to you later.